I think it boils down to, the way you asked the question was which one is more important and which one is more heroic. And I think those are two very different things, because important is basically, who played a bigger role in the story. That's one question. Whereas heroic is a very different question, especially the way we're defining heroic, that it's within your context, becoming a great person and making decisions that are challenging and running against the grain.
This is The Dilemmas on Screen, a Jewish perspective podcast, where we take ambiguous moral situations in fictional popular movies and TV shows and analyze them from a Torah lens. As a quick overview, The Lord of the Rings follows Frodo, a hobbit who inherits a magical ring that turns out to be the One Ring, which was created by the Dark Lord Sauron to control Middle-earth. The only way to destroy the ring is to bring it deep into Sauron's territory, Mordor, and cast it into the fires of Mount Doom. Frodo volunteers for the mission and is joined by a fellowship to help him get to Mordor, including 3 other hobbits. One of those hobbits is Sam, who is Frodo's gardener and who gets looped into the journey by accident. Eventually, at the end of the first movie, Frodo continues their journey alone. Sam, however, insists on joining Frodo. Frodo and Sam set out to Mordor together. Along the way, they're hunted by Gollum, who had possessed the ring for centuries. Gollum is corrupted by the ring and wants it back very badly. Sam rescues Frodo a few times throughout the journey, including from Shelob, a giant spider, from orcs who capture Frodo, and most poignantly, on Mount Doom itself, where Frodo is passed out and Sam says, "I can't carry it, i.e. the ring, for you, but I can carry you." And Sam picks Frodo up and walks up the mountain. Frodo gets to Mount Doom, but chooses to keep it. The ring is ultimately destroyed because Gollum steals it back and falls into the lava with the ring. There have been debates for as long as Lord of the Rings has been in print as to who is the hero of the story, or perhaps who is the most important or the biggest hero. Is it Frodo, who carried the ring, or is it Sam, who carried Frodo, both literally and figuratively? View 1. Frodo is the bigger hero. Common arguments you'll hear about this is, look, Frodo bears the ring. That's the ultimate burden. It's corrupting. It's painful. 2, Frodo voluntarily accepts a nearly impossible mission, knowing it could cost him his life and sanity. 3, he resists the ring for a very long time, longer than most could, even if he ultimately fails at the end. Gandalf, Galadriel, and others venerate him as a ring bearer who has earned rest and honor for his service. This view emphasizes self-sacrifice, moral struggle, and spiritual burden. Frodo undertook a quest no one else dared. Delving into a bit more detail, when it becomes clear the ring cannot stay in the Shire because Sauron and his minions know where it is, Frodo asks, "Where must I go?" He voluntarily takes up the quest, despite the danger. Even once he brings it to Rivendell, all he supposedly agreed to do until his betters can make a decision, he chooses to take the ring to Mordor. One of his most well-known quotes is, "I will take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way." At which point, 8 others are selected or volunteer to go with him, making the Fellowship of the Ring. In the middle of the journey, Frodo tells Gandalf, "I wish the ring had never come to me." And even so, Frodo is fully willing to go by himself, as we see at the end of the first movie. Yes, Sam joins him, but Frodo was still willing to go it alone. Even in failure at Mount Doom, Frodo's journey made victory possible. That's view 1. View 2, Sam is the bigger hero. Common arguments you'll hear is, Sam is consistently selfless, humble, and unshaken. Sam saves Frodo multiple times, emotionally and physically. Sam resists the ring when he briefly holds it, and gives it back, something Frodo couldn't do. Sam asks for no reward, and still returns home to build a good, peaceful life. This view emphasizes loyalty, courage and service, and everyday moral strength. Sam was never meant to be the ring bearer, yet rises to the task when needed. Delving into a bit more detail, Sam was roped into this by Gandalf because Sam happened to be around and unintentionally eavesdropped on Frodo and Gandalf's conversation. Sam didn't choose the quest, at least not initially. At the end of the first movie, when Sam chases Frodo into the river, Sam tells Frodo, "I made a promise, Mr. Frodo. A promise. Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. And I don't mean to." Sam also gives the ring back to Frodo even when he briefly holds it. He and Bilbo are the only ones who did that. After the quest, Sam returns to a simple life, embodying the ideal of service without glory. The quote that encapsulates people's view on Sam is, "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you." In other words, the general perspective on Sam is that while Frodo carried the ring, Sam carried Frodo. With that, we have a few questions we'd like answered. 1. Before we discuss who's the greater hero, Frodo or Sam, what is a hero in Jewish thinking? What makes a person heroic? 2. What's greater, carrying the ring or carrying the ring bearer? In other words, is heroism about bearing the weight of evil or about never giving up on someone who does? 3. I think it's tempting to say, they're both heroes. Let's just leave it at that. But that doesn't sound satisfying. Is their heroism different or the same? They're both doing this as a service to others, going outside of their comfort zone. What nuance should we be picking up on here? And 4. Much of what seems to make Frodo the hero here is carrying the burden of the ring. People often comment, Frodo wouldn't have gotten anywhere without Sam. And much of that statement is true. Frodo stumbles regularly, and Sam saves the day. What exactly is the nature of the heroism of Frodo? And what about the heroism of Sam, since he did not have the principal burden of carrying the ring? I am excited to welcome Rabbi Menachem Siderson to this episode to answer our questions. Rabbi Siderson graduated from the Center for Kehillah Development in Jerusalem with smicha from the Chief Rabbinate of Israel in 2020. Since then, he has been the rabbi of the shul at Aish of the Rockies in Denver, Colorado, where he guides both the local community and Aish's signature outreach programs. He also serves as a resident sofer and mohel for Denver, and is a member of the Denver Based In. To reach Rabbi Siderson, just send him an email at msiderson@aishrockies.org. I've included links to his various social media platforms below. All right, Rabbi Siderson, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Lord of the Rings, I'm excited to revisit. Definitely one of my favorite movies. And something I've noticed a lot of people debate has been the Frodo or Sam question. Who's the bigger hero? A lot of people tend to place a lot of emphasis on Sam's heroism, his loyalty to Frodo. And other people are like, Frodo's the guy who was carrying the ring. He's the one who had to kind of absorb all of its evil, all of its poison. And it's a fair question. Like, Frodo never would have gone to Mount Doom if it weren't for Sam, but Sam's not the one who's carrying the principal burden. So, in the Torah lens, who is the biggest hero? And perhaps a good launching point for this discussion would be, what is a hero? What's the Torah's perspective on what a hero is or what a hero does?
I think that's a really great question. I'm really excited to talk about it. Also, definitely one of my favorites. I read the books back when I was in second grade, if you can believe that, and was super excited for the movies to come out. And definitely the world has decided that they are some of the best movies of all time. So really excited. I've had this question for a long time. Who is the bigger hero? I think what really kicked me off thinking about who the bigger hero was, I hope I'm correct about this, when they had, the Return of the King, the third movie in the trilogy, third book. It won, I think, 11 out of the 11 Oscars that it was nominated for. And the one that it didn't win was Best Supporting Actor, if I'm not mistaken. And the actor that portrayed Samwise Gamgee did not receive that award. And that was very frustrating for me because I had always thought that he was kind of one of the heroes, if not the biggest hero in the whole story. So that got me thinking, if he didn't win this award and his character wasn't getting that much attention, then who really was the bigger hero? And I think that you're 100% right, that the jumping off point for this discussion from a Torah perspective is going to be, well, how does the Torah define a hero? And my first question would be, well, how do you say hero in Hebrew? In certainly biblical hero, I don't even know how you would say hero. Like, would it be a gibor, someone who's mighty? Would it be, I'm sure in modern Hebrew they have something that's the equivalent, but in biblical Hebrew, in the Torah, I don't know if there would be a word for that. There could be a mighty person, a strong person, a righteous person, but how would you define a hero? That's really confusing for me. And I think that's a great point to start with. How does the Torah define a hero?
That's actually true. As I was actually thinking about that, I was thinking of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos of Ezehu Gibor, but that's not who is a hero. It's who is mighty, like you said. I think if you were to ask an Israeli, how would you say hero? They would say Gibor, but that's not, at least a Torah, that might be what people mean in like Israeli Hebrew now, but that's not the way the Torah, that's not the Torah word for it. It means something else.
Right. It's definitely the case. A hero, in my mind, a hero is someone, even in English, really, you could ask, what's the definition of a hero? I'm sure there's a technical definition, but I think we view a hero as somebody who rises above the average, who takes on responsibilities and missions and accomplishes things that other people are not willing or able to accomplish. They go over and above their own abilities and their own expectations, and they accomplish something tremendous, which benefits the world. I think that would probably be a fairly accurate definition of a hero. The question is, in Hebrew, what would you call that? And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, a gibor, a chacham, it talks about these mighty people, the wise people, but what's a hero? So I don't know. I think that there's a medrash that really defines, to some extent, doesn't use the word hero, but it says something about a great person, which to my mind, I associate that with the Torah definition of a hero. And that medrash is based on, it's based on the fact that the medrash says that there were 10 people in the history of the world that they were notel schar. They took the reward of the entire generation. Again, doesn't say the word hero, but if someone is taking the reward of the entire generation, that sounds like a hero to me. Someone who was equal to the entire generation, who deserved the reward of the entire generation, who rose above everything. Definitely sounds like they accomplished a tremendous amount over and above what anyone else was able to do. And because of that, in my mind, that would make them a hero. So if we can find out who these people were, what they accomplished, and then try and distill what the unifying factor is that makes them this hero, I think that will give us a glimpse into what the Torah defines as a hero. And then we have to figure out if we can apply that to our debate of Frodo and Sam and see which one of them would be the bigger hero.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a great launching point. Let's do it.
Okay, so here are the list of the 10 people. 3 of them are going to be not surprising to you. 7 of them are going to be pretty shocking. And to me, that's what defines what a hero is. The 3 are the 3 men. And those are Noach, Avraham, and a little bit more surprising, Lot. So Noach, okay, not a huge surprise, right? He lives in a time of everyone is just totally depraved. Everyone is hedonistic. There's just immorality, murder, terror all over the world. God says, that's it. I'm done with this. I'm destroying everything. And Noach says, I'm going to be righteous. Noach was ish tzaddik. He was a righteous person. He was tamim haya. He was simple and complete in his service of God. And he rises above all of that filth that's in his world. And he serves God. And God saves him and his family from the flood. Seemingly pretty heroic. Doesn't save people, doesn't do something totally drastic or dramatic, but he's a hero because he remains true to his principles of honesty and good morals and faith in a world that's falling apart all around him. That's Noach. Avraham, number 2, also easy to see. Avraham is, again, someone who rises above the rest of the world. The rest of the world is following not in the way of God, worshiping idols, not believing, not understanding, and he is intellectually able to overcome that, to see the truth in the one God, and decide that he's going to serve him at the risk of his own life. They try and kill him. He's exiled. He's outcast, but he remains true to his belief. I think we can view him as a very special person as well. Lot, a little bit more difficult. Lot is definitely someone who we wouldn't necessarily put on the list of Jewish heroes if we were making it, but he did accomplish some very tremendous things. You know, when he lived in Sodom, which was, again, one of the worst places in the entire world, full of sin, full of promiscuity, full of evil, he rose above that to some extent. Yes, he chose to live there, but when he lived there, he was a great person relative to all the people there. And that's saying something. And he refused to give over his guests to the crowd when the crowd was clamoring at his door, demanding that he hand them over to be killed or worse. And he stood up for his values in the face of that. So that also was quite heroic, even though, again, he wasn't necessarily the best person possible. Okay, so we have 3 men. I think those are fairly self-explanatory. Agree?
Right. In terms of they're kind of like them against the world and they're staying true to their ideals.
Exactly. And really, that's the point I was trying to bring out. I'm going to bring out. You'll see it even more when we get to the 7 other people, the 7 ladies who are considered the greatest of their generation. But even within the 3 men, what you're saying is exactly the point, that the acts that they did themselves wouldn't necessarily be labeled as heroic, if we were in Hollywood. They didn't change. They didn't do something like fight an army. Okay, Avraham did fight an army, but they didn't, they didn't kill hundreds of people or save thousands of people or, I don't know, do all sorts of crazy stuff that heroes do in movies, but they ran against the current, right? They stood up against the world and stood strong for their values. And the 7 ladies that did that as well, again, very surprising. You would not expect to see them in this list, but the Medrash says that those are the 7 daughters of Tzlafchad. We know the story in the Torah is that Tzlafchad was someone who had died in the desert. He didn't have any sons that would take his portion in the land of Israel when the Jewish people arrived there. And his daughters were worried that they wouldn't be given his portion. They didn't know at that time the laws of inheritance as the Torah dictates them, that they would in fact inherit from Tzlafchad because there were no sons. And they were worried that their father's portion in the land of Israel would be lost. So they went to Moshe and they said, what's going to happen? And Moshe in fact told them that the halacha would be, as God told them, that they would inherit the land because there were no sons. That's the whole story. And they are labeled 7 of the 10 most incredible people in the history of the Jewish people who were able to receive the reward of the entire generation. Sounds like a hero to me. But again, what did they do? They went to court because they had a monetary claim on a piece of land. And for that, we're saying that they are the greatest of their entire generation. They're some of the greatest people that the Jewish people ever produced. So,
that definitely seems surprising. It's like they litigated their claim in court. They're heroes.
Yeah, exactly. As a lawyer, you probably think that that doesn't make you a hero. Right. It just makes you a client.
That's a good point.
So what's going on? What makes them so heroic? So I think, some things don't depend on context. This depended on context, very much so. You have to look at what they were dealing with. We're actually getting up to those parshas right now while we're recording. We're in that time of the Torah where the Jewish people are on the verge of getting into Israel, but they've suffered so many setbacks in the desert. And there's really an emotional and political climate that really runs counter to the desire of the Jewish people to run to the land of Israel. Besides for the spies, which happened at the beginning of their journey in the desert, but there were various other episodes where there was a big push to not be very excited about the land of Israel. And throughout their entire journey, the Jewish people had constantly been hearing from leaders, from stragglers, from just the general populace, is Israel really the right thing? Do we really care about this? Maybe we should go back to Israel. Just in this past week's parsha.
You mean maybe we should go back to Egypt?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Maybe we should go back to Egypt. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe we should go back to Egypt. Maybe we should go back to Egypt. And just in this past week's parsha, after the death of Aaron, the clouds of glory leave and the Jewish people go back another 7 encampments. They're attacked by the nation of Amalek. There's this constant refrain of, why are we doing this? Is this the right thing? And the people are not very excited about this. And within this, again, this political climate of people who are not excited about this journey, not looking forward necessarily to the land of Israel, they stand up and they say, we want the land of Israel. We are desperate for it. We're going to fight for it. We'll take you to court if we don't get our portion. And they realize that even though the prevalent emotion was not this is what we needed to do. So they really stood up against the tide and said, this is what we want. This is how we need to serve God. And we don't care that no one else sees it the way we see it. This is what we want. And the Torah says that, says the Medrash, is what makes them heroes. That's what makes them worthy of taking the reward of the entire generation. They were head and shoulders above everyone else, not because of what they did in as much as it was a tremendous world-changing act, but because for them personally, they showed us that it was world-changing. They stood up against the world. They said, we're going to change the prevalent emotion. We are going to lead this charge of, we want the land of Israel and we will fight for it. And that made them incredible people. And together with Avraham, Noah, and Lot, they are the 10 people that have this highest level of recognition, perhaps, that the Medrash can give someone, that they are worthy of receiving the reward of the entire generation.
Sorry, Rabbi, just as a quick interjection. I think in the Torah, there are 5 Maslafchad, not 7. Does the Midrash, do they mention another 2? I just want to make sure we have that number correct.
Thank you for catching that. I just totally misspoke, spaced out on that. Of course, there were only 5 daughters of Maslafchad. You're right, I said 7. They were indeed only 5. So altogether, that makes the 8 heroes of Jewish history. The 3 men, Avraham, Noah, and Lot. And then the 5 daughters of Maslafchad, not the 7, just misspoke there, and 8 total. You're right. Oh, thank you so much for catching that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, perfect. So again, not 10, just the 3 and the 5, and that's it.
Yep.
Great. Again, thanks for clarifying, Rabbi. You know what? That actually is funny. So funny. As a lawyer, I wish I could think of a specific case, but that actually does resonate, because sometimes taking a case to court can actually be a extremely brave and honestly borderline heroic action, because you're really fighting against the grain. There could be a lot of pressure to why are you bringing this in court? First, we don't hear. First, that a person who litigates something can literally be attacked physically because they're creating an issue out of this. And so the fact is, sometimes, yeah, you're right. If you're focusing on it's just because they wanted money, yeah, it's embarrassing. But if you're focusing on okay, but what did that mean for them to we want a portion of the land of Israel? And that was surprising. Apparently nobody wanted a portion of the land of Israel. And here they are willing to stake their claim and go up to Moshe and make their claim in court and be we want this and we do not want to be dispossessed just because we think we don't inherit. Perhaps an example would have been, it was interesting when, like back in the Second World War, the Japanese were detained. It was a pretty big embarrassment. But I do remember listening to someone who had, I think, I don't know if he had gone through the camps. Maybe he had as a kid, but I think his parents had. I don't know. He was Japanese and he had gone through it. And they said that there were apparently two Supreme Court cases the two cases that were brought to the Supreme Court until the Supreme Court said, this is unconstitutional. You have to let the Japanese go. And I was struck by this because I couldn't help but think, like, I was trying to imagine someone bring a case to the German High Court, like whatever the equivalent of the Supreme Court was in Germany, on behalf of the Jews. I was like, that never would have happened. But can you imagine if a German had been like, this is wrong, and I'm going to take this to the Supreme Court of Germany? The guy would be a hero. He's fighting against all the Nazis, his own party, putting himself at his life at risk, and saying this is wrong and must be tried in court. Like, wow, that'd be incredible. I think perhaps that's a good example. I don't know if that actually happened, but it would be nice if it would have.
Yeah, but there were heroes during the war, and there were many, many heroes. There's famous stories, there's less famous stories of people who stood up against their entire nation, their entire army, and saved Jews. And there were Germans who saved Jews. There were other people of other nationalities that saved Jews. And you're right. I don't know of any examples where they took it to court in the same way like Tzlafchad's daughters. But the idea of being a hero, not because they fought in one of the wars in World War II and they killed a lot of the enemy or they saved a lot of soldiers. There were a lot of those heroes as well. But they were heroes who were heroes because they harbored a Jew in their attic for many, many years at the risk to their own life. And no one necessarily even knew about it. Maybe we found out later, but they are certainly a hero. Standing up at the risk of your life to save someone, that's a hero.
Right, good point. And actually, I am thinking, again, he didn't take it to court, but there was an SS officer who was, I guess, captured by the Russians, by the communists. And you can imagine all of his peers were tried and executed. And there's this one SS officer who the Jews en masse were defending because of he gave them medical treatment under disguise. He refused to participate in any of the dirty stuff the Nazis were doing. And the testimony was so consistent and so overwhelming that the communists were like, this guy's innocent. And they let him go. And he went back home and he raised a family. Unreal. I wish I could remember his name, but it was just I saw this. It may have been at the International Holocaust Memorial Day. Someone posted it on LinkedIn, and I was so blown away. I took pictures of this. So I was like, this guy is I would almost want to have him on my wall. Like, what an amazing person to stand up to that. He was in a death camp. I don't remember which one, but he had consistently over the point of years consistently helped Jews under disguise, making sure that nobody knew what he was doing. And all the Jews defended him in communist court. Unbelievable. Even the communists let him go.
Wow.
Yeah. Unreal.
I think that point really flows into the next thing I want to mention, which is that I said this before, but let's flesh it out a little bit more. Heroism depends on context. I know context is a buzzword in our society nowadays, and a lot of things don't depend on context. I believe that heroism depends on context. And Chazal talk about in a lot of places about how everyone's journey, everyone's challenges are tailor-made to them. In Chazal's terms, we have lefum tzara agra. So the reward is based on the challenge. Different people have different challenges. So something which for me is a tremendous challenge and for which I could receive tremendous reward, I would be a hero if I would be able to accomplish this. For somebody else, it's not a challenge at all, not a big deal. And they wouldn't necessarily be a hero if they did that. We have also, Rav Dessler famously talks about the nekudas habechira, right? A person's point of free will. And everyone at their own stage in life, with their circumstances, with their personalities, with their opportunities, so they have choices to make. And if you choose the right thing, the moral thing, the ethical thing, the spiritual thing, the harder thing, then you are a hero in your own life. And you might not be recognized as much by the world for that, but in your context, you are certainly a hero. And that can be a personal context. It can be a communal context. It can be a national or global. It depends on so many factors. But being a hero means making the right choice given your circumstances.
Perfect. So actually, I guess that's a perfect, introduction to our topic in terms of Frodo or Sam. Because based on that, if you were to ask me who's the bigger hero, Frodo or Sam, I would actually have a really hard time saying who's bigger, because I think they both did a really good job in terms of Frodo chose to take the ring, even though he knew he knew that it probably meant his death. He was sacrificing himself. And Sam, I don't know if there was as much in terms of, at least in the movie, Gandalf kind of, and in the books too, I actually checked right before, but Gandalf kind of forced Sam on this journey. But Sam rose to the occasion. He continued to do so. He did not want Frodo to go it alone. And again, at the end of the first movie, Sam chased Frodo into the river, and he was like, "You are not going to go this alone." So based on that, like, how do you pair? Again, maybe it's a silly question. Who's the bigger hero, Frodo or Sam? It's almost like immature. It's like they're both heroes. Okay, but that's not satisfying, right? It's like we want to know, okay, who's bigger? Like, again, it might be silly, but like, I guess how do you kind of like put heroism into buckets, if you will? Are there some actions that are more heroic than others?
It's interesting that you say it's a silly question. It's an immature question. I feel like we have a need as humans to identify heroes. We gravitate towards them. It's a natural tendency that God put within us. So when we see a story, when we hear, whether it's from the Gemara or from the Chumash, from Chazal, from modern literature, from movies, we have a desire to gravitate towards heroics and a hero. I think you'd be very hard pressed to find an example of a book or a movie that doesn't have a protagonist, right? It doesn't have a hero who's expected to do something heroic in that context, whether it's a war, whether it's a lawsuit, whether it's an emotional achievement in some sort of love story. Like, there's always going to be your hero. And we have a need to gravitate towards that hero because it's a source of inspiration for us. That's what we want to see. We have that in Chazal as well. Chazal and the Torah, we have heroes.
I'm sorry, quickly interrupt. So what does Chazal mean?
Chazal is our sages.
Okay.
Chachmeinu Zichrono Livracha. It's our sages. So whether that's from the Talmud or from the Mishnah, it means the Jewish sages from the past hundreds and thousands of years.
Okay,
thanks for clarifying that. Good point.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Talking in code otherwise. So we want to find heroes. We need it. It's built into our DNA. We look up to people and we want to find those heroes that we can derive lessons from, that we can be inspired by. So when you're looking at a movie and you're seeing multiple protagonists and multiple heroes with all these different storylines, I think it's natural for your brain to want to figure out, well, who's the hero? Who am I looking up to? Who am I impressed by? You can't just, my wife always tells me that there's no point in watching a movie or reading a book unless you're going to come out with it with a good discussion point. Like, you're definitely a girl, not a guy. Like, I'm happy if things blow up and things are cool. I'm happy. I don't need anything else. She's like, no, there needs to be content. There needs to be a discussion point. You have to walk away with something. I think she's right. I think that's definitely a better place to be. And I think that part of what we walk away with is the moral and the lesson and the inspiration of the lead character. That's usually a key point that we walk away with, how they overcame their challenge, how they struggled, and how they are a hero. So if we're walking away confused about, well, who was the real hero, that's something we're going to have to resolve.
So actually, I appreciate that. So first, thank you because sometimes I feel bad. I'm like, does it really matter? But you're making a really good point. It does matter. And again, not necessarily because of the contest, but again, like you said, who are we drawing inspiration from and why? Who's the focus? That is a legitimate question. Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's true. When I was younger, we definitely had another debate about Lord of the Rings, which was, who would you rather be? Who's cooler? Is it Legolas or is it Aragorn? I think that's a less significant discussion, but it was, it's also there. Your brain goes there too. Which guy? One's more macho, one's cooler. I don't know. Interesting discussion. Lord of the Rings happens to be the complexity of the plot and his Tolkien's ability to flesh out the subplots and give so many characters their own fully developed storylines within the trilogy is fantastic. We're talking about Frodo and Sam. Aragorn is another hero throughout the whole story. And he has his own journey and his own struggles and his own heroism throughout the whole thing. And we're not even talking about him because I think he's definitely not the main character, but he's a super important sub-character with his own heroism.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm sure the Aragorn, I'm glad we didn't include him because I feel like it would also be it's a different discussion. He's almost like the classic hero. He's like a great warrior, a great knight. Or I guess they don't have the term knight, but he's eventually he becomes the king.
He's the king.
Right. He's the king. So he's the classic hero. It's it's more surprising perhaps that like people who are so almost seemingly insignificant, like these little hobbits who carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and do it with grace and nobility and heroism.
Yeah, it's so true. You have the fellowship. Here we are discussing Frodo and Sam. You have the fellowship, and you have it's 9 people, right? Nine beings. They're not people. nine different people, and everybody there, okay, except for Merry and Pippin, everyone else is more powerful, more talented, more capable, more heroic in some sense than Frodo and Sam. You have a wizard. You have one of the coolest elves ever. You have this macho dwarf, and you have 2 men who are one's a king and one's who is it? Is it
the steward? The son of the steward of Gondor.
Yeah, I forget his name.
Boromir.
Oh yeah, there you go. So they're powerful people, and they're masters of war, and they're brave and they're fearless, and they're, except for Boromir, who's killed in the end of the first, they're there to the end. And Aragorn, also he refuses the ring too, by the way, at the end of the first, right? When Frodo offers him the ring, he says, I would have gone with you into the very depths of Mordor, and he closes Frodo's hand on the ring. And he like you said, he's really more of a classical hero, which to me brings out this discussion really to where we want it to be, which is where we started. We don't define a hero the way that a lot of the world defines a hero. And I think and really that's Tolkien's genius, was he made the heroes of this trilogy the hobbits. And it starts in The Hobbit, really, right? In the prequel, where the hero of The Hobbit is the Hobbit, again, with elves and men and dwarves and wizards and everyone. But the hero is the simple, unassuming hobbit. And now we come to Lord of the Rings, and we're debating, well, which one of the simple, unassuming hobbits is the hero? But it's clearly one of them. It's not the powerful, mighty, talented, charismatic man, dwarf, or elf. I think that's very, very telling.
Right. That is a good point. So I guess, like, turning back to them, I guess their heroism seems different, right? Like Frodo, again, he takes the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he chooses to take the ring. And pretty much everyone is in agreement, like, it's got to be you. There's no one else. You have to do it. Gandalf won't do it. Galadriel won't do it. Like you said, Aragorn won't do it. No one wants to take the ring except for Boromir, but he clearly, that would not have been the right choice. But so Frodo takes it, and he's willing to go it alone. Again, at the end of the first movie, Frodo is fully willing to separate. He literally goes into the boat by himself, fully intending to embark on this crazy journey. And he's absorbing all of Sauron's evil. And he's completely possessed. I think at the end of the third movie, before Sam picks him up, like Frodo says, like, I have the quote here, actually, if I can just quickly read it. There's no veil between me and the wheel of fire. I can see him with my waking eyes. Frodo's completely possessed by the ring, right? So in terms of, he's taking this on willingly. So that's incredible. But then you have Sam, who's the loyal friend, who's going with Frodo to the end, fights Shelob, fights the orcs, is willing to take the ring if he needs to in order to get it to the crossing point. Like, you have this incredible loyalty from Sam. You have the self-sacrifice by Frodo. Like, which one's greater and why? Like, what's the Torah lens on this? Like, they're both heroes. That's agreed. But like, what's greater, I guess? What's like the higher level to aspire to? What do we take away from this?
It's such a great question. It's really hard to figure out which one of them is the greater hero. And they both have parts or points where they seem to have excelled over the other. Neither one of them would have succeeded without the other, obviously. Frodo is the main ring bearer, so obviously the mission never would have started without him, but he never would have made it without Sam. As you just pointed out, consistently, Sam is there to save him. So to figure out who's the bigger hero, it's a really tough call. And especially with our context, figuring out that, defining that a hero is someone who rises above their expectations and above capabilities, and within their Nukudat HaBechira, within their point of choice, making those decisions and becoming heroic because they're rising above what other people would expect and leading the way. They both did that. They both did that admirably. And it's hard to pinpoint which one of them rises above the other. I guess a big part of it that probably gets people thinking, the reason why people probably have the conversation in their heads, why I have the conversation is, well, but Frodo failed at the end. If Frodo didn't make it at the very end and Frodo didn't throw the ring into the fire, and only because Samwise was there to help at the end, did it end up, it wasn't really even Samwise at the end, right? It was really Gollum who ended up taking it in. But, Samwise wasn't the one who failed at the end, but Frodo was. So does that mean that Frodo is less of a hero than Sam? I think that's where people start having that's what starts the thought process. Because without Frodo failing, I think everyone just says, well, Frodo's the protagonist. He's the main character. He's the ring bearer. He gets there. And yes, he has support of a lot of people. And Sam is really cool and stays with him to the end and supports him. But he's the hero. The reason we start thinking about, well, who's really the hero, it's only because Frodo fails at the end. I think that's a really important point.
Well, that actually, I didn't think about that. That is an excellent point. I wonder if that is the crux of, right, if Frodo had succeeded, then it seems like it would be pretty clear. The fact is, Frodo failed in his mission. Sam succeeded in his. Sam's job was get Frodo to the end. Sam got Frodo to the end. Mission accomplished. Frodo's job was, it's funny, we had another episode about this, Frodo's job was to bring it as far as he could, which I guess he did. But that is almost like a technical point. It's like, yeah, okay, very clever, Ophir. But the point is, everyone knows that Frodo is supposed to throw the ring in. That was clearly Sam's expectation. That was clearly Aragorn and Gandalf's and the whole world's expectation was Frodo's going to chuck it into Mount Doom, into the lava, and be done with it. So that is really interesting, and I want to focus in on that. I guess, does a failure amount to a lack of heroism? I'm just thinking about this fresh now. I wish but I guess, how do we approach that? Right. Does a person lose some of his heroism because he fails? Is Sam the bigger hero simply because he succeeded? Is that what it comes down to? It's almost like an embarrassment, but I'm curious, what's the approach here?
I don't think so. I think that's why we have this conversation. I think that's what jogs our brain, says, hey, you should be thinking about who's really the hero here because he failed. But I don't think that's the Torah approach to heroism and success. I don't think that setbacks and failures define a lack of heroism. The phrase that comes to my mind from our sages is Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam. 7 times a righteous person will fall down and he gets back up. We don't know how to define a hero in Torah talk, right? But a tzaddik is something that I think many people, that's where their mind would go. When we talk about who's a hero, a righteous person, that's a hero. Someone who's righteous and lifts up the generation, which is a tzaddik, a righteous person. So if we look to our heroes as tzaddikim, so does that mean that our tzaddikim can never have any failings? They can never make mistakes? They can never make a mistake and get back up and keep going? Our sages say it's not true. Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam. A sage can fall down, a righteous person can fall down 7 times and get back up. So if what's making us think that Frodo is not the hero is because he failed, but the Torah says that failure is in no way a lack of heroism.
Right. And I actually heard a really nice kind of close reading of that. It doesn't say a person falls 7 times and rises a tzaddik. That's not what it says. It says a righteous person falls 7 times and rises. Even though he's a righteous person, he falls 7 times. And he rises. He gets back up.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely true. So Frodo's lack of being able to close the story and the fact that he did fail at the end, I don't think that shows in any way the lack of him being the hero. He still accomplished everything that he accomplished. And don't forget as well, let's get back to Nukudas HaBechira, the point of free choice. To some extent, I think it's fairly fair to assume that the entire point of the Ring of Power is that it takes away your free choice, right? Frodo standing there in Mount Doom, right in front of the lava, he's literally a carbon copy of the man. Remind me, Isildur. Isildur, right? Isildur is standing there 3,000 years before, the exact same spot. And instead of Samwise, we have Elrond, right? Standing there, exact same setup, and the exact same thing happens. The only difference is that there's no Gollum to save the day by biting off his finger. So
I would actually also, to give more credit to Frodo, if Frodo possessed, I think he was journeying with it for 6 months, at least in the books. And again, in the books, I think he had it for 16 years. So Isildur had it, again, I don't remember, but I think the idea was once they defeated Sauron, they took it immediately to Mount Doom. So he had it
Right.
for what? Like a half hour, an hour? Like one is like that same day, and he still failed. And the fact is, Frodo had to deal with this level of possession for, for all these months and years, and he got as far, or perhaps even further than Isildur, because at least he was weighing the question once he did get there.
Right. So I think that it definitely brings up this Nakudas HaBechira point, the point of free will, and that if the ring removed his ability, he was possessed, and he no longer had that free will. So that also, it brings us back to a hero is somebody who makes the right decisions in their context and within their free will. Given all of their circumstances, capabilities, all the factors go into setting the stage for who you are and the choices you make. And Frodo's stage is extremely different than Sam's. Like you said, Sam is not possessed. Sam has nothing here. He's just here to support Frodo. So yes, he's making his decisions are very, very challenging, but he is able to make those decisions because that's his Nakudas HaBechira, that's his point of free will. But Frodo, he possibly didn't even have free will at that point if he was possessed. So his failure isn't necessarily a lack of heroism at all.
That is a really interesting point. I do want to, there are a couple more points I want to discuss, but there's one that's kind of a more natural segue. I think now that we've clarified that kind of Sam succeeded, but he succeeded because he had the supporting role. It wasn't his job to throw the ring in. His job was to be the loyal, brave friend who saw Frodo through to the end. So I guess perhaps taking a step back, like what is the greater role in Judaism? Is it to be the kind of self-sacrificing, like, I guess, the prime hero in the way that, like, I know apparently Tolkien, it was confusing to read through it. Apparently Tolkien called Sam the chief hero. There's a lot of discussion of what exactly that means. The point is, it seems like both Frodo and Sam it seems like there's definitely a perspective to take that Sam was the chief hero, that he was the bigger deal. But one thing I want to focus on is, what is like more heroic? Is it kind of being Frodo, like the self-sacrificing person who sacrifices himself for the world? Or is it the brave and loyal friend who's supporting? Like what's the Torah perspective here? Is it the person who kind of takes the burden of a task? Or is it the person who's the person who supports them all along the way, with no desire or expectation of reward or honor? I would like to discuss that, because that also kind of seems to be at the crux here. That's what Sam did, and he succeeded in that. Frodo did his job, and he kind of failed. So let's take it from that perspective.
I think it boils down to, the way you asked the question was, which one is more important and which one is more heroic? And I think those are two very different things, because important is basically, who played a bigger role in the story. That's one question. Whereas heroic is a very different question, especially the way we're defining heroic, that it's within your context, becoming a great person and making decisions that are challenging and running against the grain. You don't have to be the most important person to be the most heroic person. And I think that really, when you say that Tolkien says that Samwise was the chief hero, and I think you said that, or you wrote in the notes that Frodo was the central hero, according to Tolkien in the letter. So Tolkien is acknowledging that they're both heroes. You're the chief hero and the central hero. So, who's more important to the story? Well, I think who's more important? The central hero. Frodo's the protagonist. He's the ring bearer. He's more important to the story. But I don't think that makes him a bigger hero than Sam. One of my favorite lines of all time comes from Lord of the Rings, and hopefully I'll quote it correctly. So Frodo says to Gandalf, "I wish none of this had ever happened. I wish the ring had never come to me." And Gandalf says, "So do all who live to see such time, Frodo Baggins. But that is not for us to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the times that are given to us." And I think that's become a very famous line. It's quoted all the time. And obviously in Gandalf's voice with the music, it's just beautiful. It's perfect. But the truth is that Frodo and Sam, they are given different missions. Neither of them chose their missions. They were both presented with different missions. They both chose to accept their positions and their goals. And they both succeeded. And Frodo succeeded too. He succeeded up to the point that he was able to succeed. That was what you were mentioning before. So that's why we start thinking about the question, because he failed, but let's put that aside, because he succeeded as far as he could. So we have two people. One's in a protagonist role, one's in a supporting role. And the question is, well, who's the bigger hero? I don't think either of them is a bigger hero. I think that's really what we're getting to. If we confuse the heroism with the importance of the role that they play, the significance. And that's the mistake. That's really what Tolkien is saying. Yeah, Frodo is more important to the story. He's the central hero, but he's not more of a hero than Sam is, because Sam is, he called him the chief hero. It's just a term. But the idea is that they're both heroes because they both fulfill their roles and their missions to the best of their abilities. And that's what Gandalf is saying, that we don't choose where we're put in life. We do the best with what we're given. And that's obviously a very Jewish concept. We don't choose what we're given. We don't have the ability to decide who we're born to, where we're born, what our upbringing is going to be like, our financial status. We do our hishtadlus. We put in the best effort that we can within the situations that are given to us. And then we have faith that we are in the situation where we are supposed to be. We have the abilities that we're supposed to have, and then we've got to do the best with what we have. So what's more heroic, to be the supporting character who gets people across the finish line, or to be that character, to be that person who's leading the charge? I don't think either of them is more heroic. I think doing the best you can do in your role and doing things that people don't expect because you're making decisions that are challenging, that's a hero. And you're an equal hero, whether you're less important in the story or more important in the story.
That's amazing. I'm sure there's, as you were discussing, I remember reading a comment years ago that kind of bothered me a little bit, but it sounds like directly on point. I can't remember what exact verse it was in the Torah that said this, but it was like Moshe and Aaron were like both called like Ish or something. And then I think it's Rashi who comments there. It's like because they're both equal to each other. And then there was an Art Scroll comment saying, yeah, because the idea was like, who's more important, Moshe or Aaron? I think it's pretty clear. Like, Moshe, he's the one who liberated the Jewish people out of Egypt. He's the one who got the 10 plagues, or like he's the one who like led the charge. He led them through the Dead Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf. He's the one who got the Torah. But the Torah seems to treat Moshe and Aaron as equals. Why is that? And Archibald pointed out, because they both fulfilled their potential. They did the absolute max that they could. Now, if you were to ask them, and be like, but Aaron's in the supporting role, the answer is, that's not the point. That's not that you're missing the point. That seems to be exactly what you're saying in terms of the idea isn't like who's more important to the story. The idea is, did you like lean into what your role is and do as much as you can in your role instead of focusing on like, he's more important, I want to do what I want to do his job, or like, I don't think my job is as important, so I'm going to kind of give only 50%. The answer is no. You focus on what you have to do and you do it all the way.
Yeah. So true. It's like that in any context, any situation in life. My mind's going to, it's my son's birthday today and he likes airplanes. So we're going to take him to the airport and build him we're making an airplane cake. So my mind's all about airplanes today. So let's say you have a flight crew and you've got a aircraft carrier and you've got a pilot and you've got everything, and they complete a mission and it's tremendously successful, right? Who is the hero? So, okay, Tom Cruise is the hero because he's flying the jet, right? Okay.
Right.
But what do you mean? Nothing, they couldn't have bombed the target and won the war if not for the guy who was in the pit doing the thing. Like, I don't even know what they're doing, but without the whole team, right, nothing happens. So why isn't he the hero? The mission's not accomplished without that supporting character that you never even heard of or even thought of. So does that make him not a hero? Maybe he's less significant to the story, true, but in his own role, if he's making tough decisions, if he's working overtime and he's doing something which is mentally draining and physically straining, and he's able to get the job done, to get the plane in the air, to get to the target, then he's also a hero. He's also part of the team.
Right, absolutely. And also like the intelligence behind it. Since you need to know like if they didn't have the intelligence, then Tom Cruise could do whatever he wanted, but he never would have succeeded.
Yeah.
And as an aside, happy birthday. And thank you for taking some time out of your day to record this episode. Appreciate that.
No problem. Happy to.
Your son's a hero too.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Let's take it back to the Jewish people. Everyone has their own role to play within the Jewish people. God puts us in our position and puts us in our role, whatever that is, whether you're a rabbi, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, everyone has their role to play in life. And yes, there are some people that get more attention on the global scale or in the communal scale, right? In that medium, they appear more, you see them more. So you start to think, well, they're the hero, right? But really every single one of us is a hero in our own lives. Every single one of us is the supporting character for other people's lives, but we're also the hero in our own lives. We have that same struggle. We have our own Nakudas HaBechira. We have our own point of free will. We have our own circumstances and our own journey. And no one is more heroic or less heroic than anyone else. Anyone who's making the tough decisions, choosing what is right and not what is easy, and living a life of a successful life and a spiritual life and connected life and helping others, they're a hero in my books.
Right. That is a really powerful point. And I think that's also one of the points of Sam is the fact, I think what perhaps bothers people too is the fact that maybe initially, like apparently in the 60s when the Lord of the Rings was published, you'd have people like graffitiing, not approving that, just graffitiing like Frodo lives. And, Frodo gets like all the credit. And I think that perhaps bothers some people. They're like, well, what about Sam? And it's just, well, that itself is a lesson. Part of what makes him so heroic is that he's not in it for the glory. He doesn't care. And I don't think Frodo was either. Just, it happens to be that Frodo got a lot of glory. And like, what about Sam, the unsung hero? It's like, yeah, the unsung hero, still a hero, even if he's unsung. That's the point. Isn't you need to sing a person's song to make him realize how big of a hero he is. We need to recognize, he needs to recognize that he was, and I'm sure he did.
Yeah, it's so true. That's probably why also the other reason why we have this dilemma, right? The question we started off with was, who's the bigger hero? And then we said, well, obviously it should be Frodo. Why are we even thinking it's Sam? Well, because Frodo failed. So that's what makes us think about it. But the other thing that really makes us think about who's the bigger hero is that exactly this point is that Sam gets no attention, right? Actually, that's what I mentioned, I think, at the beginning, that, he didn't win an Oscar. Everyone else got an Academy Award except for him. Which, okay, it's not really fair because that's an acting thing, not a character thing. But that's really, I think, also what made my mind go to this and say, wait, why is he not winning? Like, he's the hero of the story. How could he not win an award? And the answer is, maybe, I know this is true, but the answer is, well, because people don't view it that way. Because he's just a supporting actor and no one's singing his song. He's not getting praised because he's just flying under the radar. He's just in the background the whole time. He's not getting that attention. And what's bothering me is that from a Torah perspective, that can be just as much, if not more, of a hero as the person in the limelight. And we need to recognize that.
Right. One thing that I also thought of, I thought this a couple of days ago as I was preparing for this episode, but there was a comment that I heard from one of my rabbis, one of my mentors, Rabbi Bernstein, and he brought out, so, one of the most famous points of in the Jewish story is the Akedah, right? The binding of Isaac. When Avram Avinu, like Abraham, the founder of Judaism, takes his son Yitzchak, Isaac, to sacrifice him on Har Moriah. And he takes him. And if you were to ask, in terms of, according to almost all commentaries, this was like Abraham's greatest of the 10 tests. It was like a huge monumental decision. It didn't make any sense. God had promised Isaac to Abraham. Abraham had been preaching his whole life against child sacrifice. Murder is prohibited. It just made no sense. But Abraham did it. And often we don't really think of like Isaac too much in the picture, even though he's 37 years old, right? We think of him as a little kid. He wasn't. He was an adult. And one thing that Rav Bernstein pointed out was the Chasam Sofer, who lived in the 1800s. He was one of the greatest Torah luminaries of his time. He said there was at least one way in which Isaac's test was greater than Abraham's, than Abraham's. Now, how is that? Because how did Abraham know that he was supposed to sacrifice Isaac?
God told him.
God told him, right? How did
Right.
Isaac know that he was supposed to be sacrificed?
Abraham told him.
Abraham told him.
Or didn't tell him.
Right. God did not tell him. Abraham told him. That is completely different. As difficult as it was to understand for Abraham, he had the clarity he needed. God told him, so he's going to do it. But with Isaac, you can't help but think like, was he ever, hey, Dad, are you sure about there's no room for error here? Are you 100% certain? And the boys, he never asks. He has 100% trust that the message was correctly delivered and Avram knew what he was doing. That is incredible. And the Chasam Sofer says that in that way, it was actually greater than Abraham's, because the point is he didn't have that clarity. And I wonder if perhaps that's kind of analogous in terms of Sam flies under the radar. He's just a little sermon. It's he has this trust in Frodo. He's like, Frodo, I need to see you to the end. So I'm going to see you to the end. As crazy as it seems, even though I don't think we should trust Gollum, even though this may seem like it's a bad idea, I'm with you to the very end.
No, I think it's a good point because Frodo, they both receive the mission, right? Gandalf assigns it to both of them. They both go to Rivendell. They both hear from the council. Like they both understand the significance of the mission, but in some ways, it definitely feels like Frodo understands the mission a lot more. He's not getting this, direct prophecy or communication, but he's the ring bearer. Like he feels the evil of the ring. He understands why this is what has to happen. At the same time that he's being possessed by it, he also is understanding its evil and understanding the need to destroy it. So the mission lives within him much more than it lives within Sam. Sam is on the outside. He doesn't feel the evil. He doesn't see that. He doesn't understand it. He just knows Frodo needs to do this. I need to help him. So I think in some ways you do have that. You have that comparison that Frodo is more like Abraham, that he has more of a understanding and a clarity that this has to happen. Whereas, like you're saying, Sam is more like Yitzchak, that more like Isaac, that he just understands because of his belief in the other person that this is what we need to do. And they're both putting their life on the line. Sam's not trusting Frodo to kill him, but he is trusting him to basically ensure that he ends up dead by going into Mordor.
Right. Absolutely. So actually, speaking of the Akedah, that reminds me of another idea I heard that I think is directly on point here. I do not remember the name of the book where this idea is recorded, but it was this professor at a prestigious university like Yale or Princeton, or maybe it was like one of their university presses. But he wrote that in the study of it, like ancient Greece and ancient Jerusalem, you kind of see two conflicting worldviews in the way that they orchestrate like their plays or in the Torah. So in for example, Greek tragedies, you'll have the chorus in terms of you have like the innermost thoughts of the character being put out to the public. There's literally a chorus of people who sing it out for everyone to hear, so everyone knows what's going on. Whereas in Torah, you see the most important moments or some of the most important moments in Torah are done completely in private. The Akedah has Abraham and Yitzchak, Abraham and Isaac, by themselves on Har Moriah, on the mountain, with God. Just them two. No one else is watching or seeing this monumental achievement achieved by Abraham and Isaac, his son. Nobody sees it, right? Yes, it's true. Later it's recorded in the Torah, but the point is there's no whole chorus of people seeking it out so everybody could learn about it. How about the giving of the Torah itself? Also, that's on the mountain with Moshe and God, and that's it. Nobody else is privy to it. Again, yes, the 10 Commandments are blasted out, but Moshe is on the mountain for 40 days by himself. For 40 days. And then one more example, when it comes to Yom Kippur, was back in temple times, everything was really done by the Kohen Gadol, by the high priest. Now this is a little hard to relate to because Yom Kippur is kind of like, it's like the biggest day for sure, right? That's when everybody comes to synagogue. But back in the day when the temple stood, it was one man. It was a one-man show. You had the Kohen Gadol, right? The high priest, who went in and did the service, and he went into the Kodesh Kodashim, right? The Holy of Holies, which he only did once a year on Yom Kippur, and it was literally just him doing the avoda, I guess, between him and God. And that happens every year. Now that's amazing in terms of you have the Akedah, right? That event with Abraham and Isaac. You had the giving of the Torah with Moshe for 40 days all alone. You have every single year Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, in the holiest place, at the holiest time, right? That's all done in private. And that's just to show that just because it's important doesn't mean you have to make it public. Sometimes the most important things are to be done in private. Not everyone has to know. And I think that's a really powerful idea here in terms of, yes, it's true. He's the unsung hero. And that's totally fine. There's actually plenty of precedent for just how like some of the greatest moments can be completely quiet with nobody else watching and nobody else knowing.
Rabbi writes on the Mishnah, he used to say, "Mor mat v'seh harbe." So you have to say a little, do a lot. And people ask, well, why do I have to say a little and do a lot? Why can't I say a lot, do a lot? Right? The point is not to be a big talker, but then not follow through. But if I'm going to do a lot, why can't I say a lot as well? I'll do everything I say. And Rabbi says that another point of saying a little and doing a lot is that sometimes when you do a lot, after the fact, make sure you're saying a little. You don't have to go and brag about what you did to the whole world, or what you did doesn't have to be known to the whole world, not while you're doing it and not after you do it. There's a there's an idea of privacy, of walking with modesty, as the prophet says. And the big things in life don't have to happen on a big public forum, and the world doesn't have to know about it. And Revolbi used to say that he wishes he could write 20 biographies, 10 biographies of great Jewish leaders, of Gedolim, and 10 biographies of great people in the secular world, and contrast them side by side. One example he gave was there was a great man named Albert Schweitzer, a not Jewish man in the secular world. He was I think a priest of some sort. He was a musician. He was a professor, a tremendously accomplished person. And he gave up everything to study medicine so that he could then move to Africa and treat the poor people there who couldn't afford medical treatment. An amazing person, inspiring. And Revolbi says, it's hard to say however, but he points out that this very inspiring, very successful person documented, he chronicled every step of his journey, and he published an autobiography detailing his amazing accomplishments. Revolbi pointed out, have you ever heard of a gadol? Have you ever heard of a great Jewish sage that wrote an autobiography that chronicled his rise to greatness in the Jewish people and what he accomplished and the kindnesses he did and the Torah he taught, and an autobiography telling the world, look at what I did? We don't have such a thing. We write biographies about our sages, but never an autobiography. And it's really representative of this idea that Judaism really, really points out that the greatness does not have to be something that's being presented on a world stage. What's done in private can be greatness as well. Sometimes it's actually greater.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Just as an aside, when we're discussing the heroes of Lord of the Rings, something that always bothered me, and it's so annoying that something bothers me because it's such a perfect story. What's with the Eagles? Like, seriously, whenever they're in trouble, the Eagles just like pop in and save the day. Like, it's like Mashiach is just like popping in and saving the day.
Yeah, that's like a classic Deus Ex Machina. And I know they get a lot of like criticism for that. It's a shame because it really is like, it's like ruins the story.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also gives us a happy ending. At least Frodo and Sam make it, right?
Yeah. But even in the Hobbit, the Eagles pop up, right? When all the dwarves and everyone are cornered. So the Eagles like save the day, and then they hop in the Eagles, and then they drop them off halfway to Erebor. It's like, why didn't you just take them the whole way? Oh, because that would have shortened the story? Oh, come on. Like, I don't get it.
That's funny. I was trying to think
why didn't the Eagles just take them to Mordor in the first place?
Right. And that's one thing I heard. I was like, why didn't they just get the Eagles to fly them over the mountain and then just dump the ring? Because that would have lasted in like a 10-minute movie, just like a nice quick, like say scenic view through New Zealand until you get in. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Maybe the answer is that maybe that's also a lesson that life has its challenges, and if life would just be easy and the salvation would just come and there'd be the miraculous solution, then there'd be no point, right? That's really the message, that there has to be a struggle, there has to be a battle, and when you go as far as you can, and when you're cornered and there is no other way, then Hashem will step in and do the rest. But you've got to do your hishtadlus, you've got to put in your effort, and only when you've maxed out, then Hashem will send you that effort to get you to the next stage. But then you've got to kick in with your effort again. Otherwise, there's no point in the movie. There's no point in life.
Well, yeah, I think
it's
that
a whole
actually
other podcast. A whole other podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole other episode. But I think that also like it adds a lot in terms of God's there and He's going to help. But there's an expectation that you need to do like you don't put in your own effort.
Yeah, totally.
That's fantastic. All right, Rabbi, I love that. It's great. Good. All right.
Thanks for having me on. See ya.
My pleasure. All right. Thank you for tuning in to the Dilemmas on Screen, a Jewish Perspective podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. If you have any suggestions for a moral dilemma you'd like analyzed, feel free to send it over. Thanks again, and see you next time.